Welcome to episode 43 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Tim Gallaudet. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Gavin. Good to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm having a great day. As I told you, I've been doing a lot of scuba diving this summer, and I am getting ready to do some more coming up in the Outer Banks of North Carolina near on the U.S. East Coast.
Ah, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I just want to confirm, did I get your surname correct?
You did. You did.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad I did that, and I am thanking you for being on the show because it's been a little while in the making, hasn't it? Getting our schedules to align to get this recording done. So
yeah,
really
I'm
good.
glad to be here, and I'm glad we can make it happen.
Fantastic. Well, I've got the 4 questions as we have at the beginning of every show. So I'm going to give you them one at a time, just bullet point answer, and then we'll dive straight in. So The first question is, when did you join?
I joined the U.S. Navy in July of 1985, and it was through the U.S. Naval Academy.
Nice. Cool. We might hear some more info on that. The second question is, what service and branch? So you said the naval, was there a particular part, a branch inside the naval part there?
Yeah. In the Navy, there's several disciplines, and I was a specialist in meteorology and oceanography and hydrography. And so that's a community within the information warfare discipline of the Navy, and that's where I served in my entire 32 years.
Nice. Okay. That'd be hopefully interesting to hear that. And how long did you serve for in total?
Well, I was commissioned for 28 years, but I count those 4 years at the Naval Academy because I was subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So I count that as military service.
Absolutely. I would. So definitely. And lastly, what rank did you get to?
I retired as a 1-star admiral or rear admiral.
Nice. Now, I may ask some silly questions later because I don't know all the ranks for the Navy, Royal Navy or US Navy. So apologies up ahead.
Well, I'll tell it for everybody. It's like a 1-star general, a brigadier general.
Okay. That does help. So thanks. Now, let's rewind the clock and learn a little bit more about yourself. Where was you born and where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and the influence on my career was going to the beach every summer. And I was a competitive swimmer. I liked to surf, and that drew me into the ocean and just a love for everything about the ocean. And because of that, I wanted to go to the Naval Academy and study oceanography. And then, of course, when you're in the Navy, you get to go work on the ocean. So that's really that. My upbringing in that region of the United States led me into my career field of oceanography.
Okay. So when you were growing up, were you quite good in the academic side of things? Did you enjoy school?
I was pretty academic. I had good grades. I was interested in science. And of course, I also was interested in the Navy because my dad was a reserve officer in the Navy, it was in the intelligence field. So both of those influences, I think, factored into my joining the military.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Did you have influence there? So sounds like you did. And at what point in school life did you realize that that's going to be the area that I'm going to go into for my career?
Well, I'd say around high school. What I was is I told you I was a swimmer, and I'd go to these ocean races in San Diego every year and during my high school years, and in the area where the race was, La Jolla, California, across from that cove, there is a institution for oceanography called Scripps Institution. And so in high school, I learned about that place, and it drew me to want to go there basically and get a PhD. And so when I learned about the Naval Academy having a graduate scholarship to go to Scripps, the two kind of came together, and that's really what led me to go to Navy and strive for that scholarship, which I got, and did get my master's and then PhD in oceanography there.
Oh, brilliant. And so what was your journey to get there? Was there certain people you had to speak to, certain things you had to put in for to be able to join up like that?
Well, yeah, and to get to the United States Naval Academy, you have to submit an application. You also have to get nominated by two congressmen, and that's the process. You go and request that letter and do an interview, and you have to take a medical exam. And my story is actually kind of unique in that I took my medical exam, and your listeners might laugh at this, in Southern California at a Navy base. And I am I'm color deficient. I'm not color blind. I see colors, but I can't pass the color test that's required for naval pilots and Navy SEALs, etc. And I kind of knew that growing up, but when I took the physical, I should have been disqualified from going into the Naval Academy because they don't allow people with vision deficiency like mine. But there was a really cute female hospital corpsman administering my exam, and she liked me, and we were chatting, and she basically coached me through the whole color vision test without my knowing it. And I showed up on the first day at the Naval Academy, and I failed the full physical again, and they were gonna kick me out. But I was a recruited swimmer. I was the fastest in the country in the 500-yard freestyle in prep school. And the coach really wanted me. So they made me sign a waiver. And ironically, the waiver, because the Naval Academy the mission is to graduate line officers. So support officers, oceanography, supply, intelligence is not their main mission. But the waiver I had to sign was to acknowledge that I couldn't get a line commission, and I had to go into a restricted line like oceanography. So it sort of all worked out.
Okay. And how did you find being there? I'm going to class it as a course. And also, how long was it?
Well, the academy is 4 years, and it's basically an undergraduate education with a lot of military thrown in. And just like West Point is for the Army in the United States. And I know other nations have their naval academies, and as you do, and Army or military academies. And so that's for the kind of nature of those commissioning programs.
Oh, fair. Yeah, because you mentioned it was 4 years earlier, or 4 years before you got the commission. I wasn't sure if it was broken up or anything. But was there anything in particular from those 4 years that stands out, a memory or an experience?
Well, I love the studies I was pursuing, so it really energized me to stay in that career field I chose. There's a lot there at the Naval Academy compressed into 4 years. I think the thing I liked most was going on these summer cruises on Navy ships. And I went on cruises on a USS Destroyer, the USS O'Bannon, and we went to the Caribbean. And it wasn't the most arduous deployment, but I would say there was some rum involved, but it was I think being exposed to U.S. Navy ships for the first time was really exciting to me.
And was that the first time, or had you done it as a kid with your dad being part of it?
No, I never had been on a Navy ship before. I'd seen them in Navy bases. My dad often went to Pearl Harbor every year for his active duty reserve training, and I saw ships there. But getting to ride on a ship and stand in the bridge watches, that was it for me.
Okay, so you fell in love again, essentially.
Oh yeah, being on the water and going to sea, it was just I knew I wanted that.
And so when you get your first question now, is it a draft? Is it a deployment? Is it like where you go to your first unit? What's that called?
So I was unusual because of my academic and science pursuits. I got a graduate degree to this institution of oceanography in San Diego, La Jolla, San Diego. I did that first. That was my first job, is just to go be a civilian and grow my hair long, do a lot of surfing, but study in a very intense master's degree program. My first deployment or assignment was really interesting. It was a hydrographic ship in the Arabian Gulf right after the first Gulf War. And in the first Gulf War, we sent some aircraft carriers into the Gulf, and the charts were antiquated. And so they couldn't really operate it didn't have much room to maneuver. And aircraft carriers have to go fast all the time to get wind for the jets to take off and get sufficient lift. So having no sea room, and it was not a good thing. And so my hydrographic ship went in and updated the charts of all of the Arabian Gulf and Arabian Sea. And an interesting thing, just to go forward a little bit in my career, after that first hydrographic assignment, making charts of the seafloor, a few years later, I then served on an aircraft carrier during the first strikes into the Iraq War, and in 2003. And I was an officer of the deck. I was a deck watch officer. I drove the ship for 2 4-hour watches a day, and I navigated off the very charts I produced more than a decade earlier.
Wow. Okay.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I was going to say when you were doing that navigation for the I guess the second Gulf War, do you remember doing certain parts of that? So you were looking at your
Oh,
at
I
your
do. I
maps.
do. I mean, I was that first deployment was on the USNS Harkness, U.S. naval ship, operated by the Military Sealift Command, and we were the technical unit that did the surveying, and that really made me fall in love with the ocean again because some of our missions were to go out in small boats and anchor on some of the small islands in the Arabian Gulf, and do tidal measuring, and we saw all sorts of sea life, pilot whales, humpback whales. I even saw a killer whale in the Arabian Gulf, sea snakes, jellyfish, coral reefs. It was a really neat tour.
Brilliant. And so when you got to your first assignment, what rank are you that at that moment?
Yeah, when in the U.S. Navy you get commissioned as an ensign is the name, and that's first officer grade, and then you promote to lieutenant junior grade. And I was actually my first ship. I was a lieutenant junior grade, and the whole time I was in graduate school before that I was an ensign. And then by the time I
Right.
left that ship in the Arabian Gulf, I was there for 2 years. It was a permanent deployment. We never came back to the U.S. I was promoted to lieutenant.
Okay. Okay. And do you stay on that ship, or did you then get sent somewhere else? Because
Right, right.
I'm
So
not too sure.
the
Yeah.
Navy
Go on.
usually has a sea shore rotation in assignments.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
went from that ship to a shore station in Spain, and as is
Oh.
my field, I was doing oceanographic analysis for the submarine force in the Sixth Fleet, and I was also doing weather forecasts for ships and aviation squadrons in the U.S. Sixth Fleet in the Mediterranean.
Okay. So whereabouts is that? I know you
Spain,
mentioned
pardon me,
Spain, but
the Navy base is Rota, and it's across the Bay of Cadiz on the Atlantic side of Spain, on the Atlantic coast.
okay. Okay. So
And
whilst you
I'll
were
tell
there,
you,
did
that was
yeah
some
go.
really good duty. I mean, when you're in the Navy, join the Navy, see the world. It is absolutely true. We traveled, went to fairs and festivals, and visited castles. And I ran with the bulls in Pamplona. This was a really terrific tour. It's everything that you want out of overseas duty.
Yeah, absolutely. How long was you there for in the end then?
That was a 2-year tour as well.
Okay. Okay. And so that's good. You got to see the scenery of Spain. That's definitely something I've not done yet. I've not really seen much of
Oh,
Spain.
I highly
Um,
recommend it, Gav.
yeah, really want to go to Barcelona. Did you go to Barcelona or any of the big
Oh yeah,
cities?
Barcelona several times, and love that
Yeah.
city. Yes.
And so after that, you mentioned about this shore and did you say land?
Yeah, yeah. Shores land and sea is
Sea is out. Yeah. So
afloat. Yeah.
are you going straight back from there
Yeah.
back to sea?
That's what I did. So I went to a ship based in San Diego called the USS Peleliu, and it's a helicopter carrier, and it
Mm.
carries Marines, and it also carried the Harrier jets, the jump jets. You're familiar with those, I'm
Oh,
sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice.
And that was a real cool assignment. I was the ship's meteorologist, but I also drove the ship. I was a deck watch officer, and we deployed to the Western Pacific. We went to Thailand, had some nice liberty there, and then we went to the Arabian Gulf again. Actually, I navigated off my charts that tour as well, and we were enforcing the no-fly zone the U.S. established for Saddam Hussein up in the southern part of Iraq during that tour. And I actually got to
Okay.
live in Kuwait for a time, and we even went on a tour of the southern section of Iraq to look at some of the destroyed armor from the first Gulf War.
Okay. Now you mentioned a few times about driving the ship.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that part of your role, or is that just something you do as an officer on ship? And again, that may be a silly question, but
Oh, there's no silly questions. So on a Navy ship, officers they have, I guess, primary duties. You'd say, and mine was the ship's meteorologist. But then you stand watches. Some people stand watch in the engine room. Some people stand watch in what they call the Combat Information Center, where all the tactical decisions are made, if you will, and fire control, etc. And then there's the bridge, the driving of the ship, the actual turning a rudder and steering a course, as well as slowing down or speeding up in the engines. And the way that works is there's an officer of the deck who's in charge of everything, and
okay.
then you have a helmsman who's controlling basically the helm, the steering wheel, for lack of a better term, as well as the engine orders that go down to the engine room. So you just give the commands, and the ship does whatever the captain wants it to do. But the captain can't do that all day. He's got to attend to business and have meetings and planning things and all this, and he's got to sleep. So he or she. And so the officer of the deck is the person that runs the ship for him or her for a stretch of watch, usually 4 hours during the day. And that's the cycle on ships. And I love ship driving, especially big ships like a helicopter carrier. There's just so much going on, air operations. And that's just, some people that you go to an airport and they enjoy watching aircraft taking off and landing. Well, it's a whole other thing when you're on a moving airport with military aircraft. I enjoyed it immensely.
Amazing. Now, sorry to anybody that thinks that was a silly question earlier, but I had no clue. So sorry if you're shouting at the app or anything.
Yeah, sure.
But all those other areas that you mentioned, do you kind of do a rotation as individuals?
So you pick where you want to qualify and perform. And I wanted the bridge. And so some people their career is to be engineers, and they do the engineering watches. And I was good for me too, as the ship's meteorologist, to always be looking out the window and knowing whenever severe weather was coming our way, if you will. So, and it gave me a lot of time to be near the captain, so I could constantly advise him on for planning purposes when weather would get really bad. For example, in the Arabian Gulf, dust storms are a thing, and they really ruin aviation operations. You could think fine dust particles do not mix well with high performance jet engines. And so often when we were predicting dust storms, we put all the aircraft into the hangar bay and just basically button up the ship and things like that. That's what a meteorologist hopefully is good for on a helicopter carrier or an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Now, how long was you on that ship for as a deployment or a
that was a 2-year tour, and we made 2 deployments to the Western Pacific and Arabian Gulf. And then I finished that. And then I had a real good luck situation where in my small area of the community of the Navy, I got to go back and get my PhD after that tour. I had a really good tour on that ship. And pardon me. Yes, that's exactly what happened. I had a good tour, and I went and finished my PhD in San Diego. The ship was in San Diego, so that was an easy transition. And I did that, and then I went right back to sea again on an aircraft carrier, this time with jets and some helicopters. And this was at the very start of what the Afghanistan campaign, what the U.S. calls Enduring Freedom. And I was on the USS Kitty Hawk, and basically I graduated, I flew out to the ship, and we began out in the Arabian Sea, and we conducted the first strikes into Afghanistan after 9/11. And so unusually, we did not have our jets, though. We kept them in Japan. That's where the ship was stationed. And we unloaded all these special operations helicopters and a task force composed of Rangers, SEALs, Special Forces, and even CIA operators. And that was a pretty exciting deployment.
It sounds it. And what kind of role was you within that? For the deployments of those special forces?
So same thing. I was driving the ship, and at the same time, I was in charge of the meteorologists that were supporting the ship, as well as the helicopters and the operators. And they had to do these long refueling missions from the Arabian Sea into Afghanistan, flying over, I believe, Pakistan. And so weather was a big deal. That long route there with refueling, and so bad weather could just really make things go south quick. And so we were briefing those operators nonstop, and they were taking it all in because they really depended on knowing the environment to stay safe.
Okay. Now, doing your job as a meteorologist, can't even get that word out. Meteorologist. No, you're gonna have to say it. Was it?
Yeah.
Meteorologist.
That's fine.
What kind of equipment do you have on these ships? Does it vary, or is it pretty much similar across all these different ships?
Right. Well, it's what a lot of modern meteorologists use today, and we had satellite receivers so we could see imagery. We have, of course, our own sensors, but we had communications to gather sensor data from the meteorological network around the world, and so and then we have decision support tools that aid us in predicting the performance of either aircraft, sensors, and even weapons. And so that's what a lot of meteorology and oceanography is used in the military, is to predict the performance of any given payload platform. and know whether if the weather is going to be going to impact a mission, and therefore either not do the mission, delay it, move it up, or do it a different way.
Okay. So sometimes are you given the final decision, or are you just given
Well,
the
no,
information and then
we
someone higher up?
recommend. We make
Yeah. Okay.
recommendations. A good story here. You'll like this. So everybody's familiar with Operation Neptune Spear. This is the raid to capture and kill Osama bin Laden. And the person who commanded that actually is a friend of mine, 4-star Navy SEAL Admiral Bill McCraven. And Bill told me that when they were planning that mission in May of, I believe, 2011, they were looking at the average temperatures at night. And there was a no-go date, I think, at the beginning of May, because the temperatures would get too warm for those special operations helicopters to get sufficient lift with their full load of troops and material. And that's actually the day I think it was carried out was May 1st. So that was a really important driver on the planning of the operation. And as one example of how meteorologists and oceanographers support military operations.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool to hear that part, because as soldiers on the ground, you don't really see or get involved with that part. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, at the point of you heading out to Afghanistan to support that, what rank are you? Because I'm guessing you've gone up maybe a rank or so by that point.
Right. I was lieutenant commander on the USS Kitty Hawk, and we came right back to Japan. And after just a little bit of maintenance, we went right out to the Arabian Gulf. So the Arabian Sea was for Afghanistan. Then we went to the Arabian Gulf for the first strikes into Iraq for the second Iraq War. And that was 2003, in March of 2003. And doing much of the same thing, providing weather information for all the aircraft, conducting strike operations, supporting the Marines and the Army and all the folks, Air Force personnel and the combined force. We had, of course, the UK assets were there as other allies. And so our weather was being used to support all of that.
Brilliant. And also, how big is your team? Because I'm guessing you're not the only one with that kind of ability on ships.
Right.
How big is the team?
I personally did very little weather. I had a team of aerographers mates that did it. Most of my time was on the bridge driving the ship. And in the Iraq War, that was probably the most hairy experience in my military career, because I'm driving an aircraft carrier 1,000 feet long, 5,000 people plus, and there were two other aircraft carrier strike groups in the Arabian Gulf. So aircraft carriers, some cruisers, destroyers, a submarine possibly, and so we're all operating in our areas. And every now and then we'd all have to switch, because one of us would have to do some refueling where we were getting resupplied all the ordnance that we were throwing into Iraq, as well as fuel and water and supplies. And so there was a stretch in the Arabian Gulf that we call Gasoline Alley, that for a stretch, usually 4 hours or so, you would steam, drive your ship alongside a refueling ship, and you're only 120 feet apart. And for 4 hours, you're trying to stay very close and not crash into each other while you connect lines to each ship across the water, and you haul the equipment, and there are fuel hoses too, and there's several areas where you're attached. And it's called underway replenishment. The Navy, U.S. Navy's perfected it, but it's very hazardous navigation. And by the way, in the Arabian Gulf, there were ships everywhere. There were small little boats that called Arabian dhows. There were oil tankers, and then there were all the sea lift delivering all the material, the armor, and everything into Iraq and Kuwait. And that I didn't hit anything. It was a near miracle. And so. That was it's funny because a lot of folks on the ground, they came back with PTS, right? And I didn't go on the ground, but after 2 years of doing that, where I was, if you're on an aircraft carrier, you're driving it, the opportunity to collide with another ship is high, and so that could kill people. Then when you're moving aircraft on the deck, and the officer of the deck gives permission to do that, if you turn the ship while they're doing that, the aircraft's going to roll over and probably take a few sailors with it. So every day I was constantly hyper alert not to make a bad decision and end up killing somebody. So that was the difference of me and my deployment compared to other folks who were on the ground. I never got shot at, but I was so stressed out about killing people that that I really had to decompress when I came back, and it took me a couple months to get normal again, and it was tough. My wife was you know, she had a hard time with that because I'd come home and I wouldn't it was hard for me to think things that weren't life and death were important, you know, groceries and this and that, and just, you know, taking the trash out. And I was very, yeah, and I know you have folks on your shows who've gone through this and in different ways. And certainly I didn't have the worst of it, but it took me a good couple months to get normal again. And yeah, that's the nature of those jobs sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that just shows that you care. You're one of the good leaders that care, because I'm guessing that there could be people out there that might not care as much as you, and therefore you soak up that kind of that stress and that worry. So that's maybe just part and parcel of you and you as a person, I suppose.
No, thank you, thank you.